Welcome to Syntax. In this Monday hasty treat, we're going to be talking about how cache ruins everything around me. That's right. It's both simultaneously a Wu-Tang reference, but also a reference to things that are actually going on in our real development life. Right now, we have been experiencing some crazy, interesting cache issues on the Syntax site, and we thought it would be worthwhile to take some time to break them down in this episode. As always, my name is Scott Tolinsky. I'm a developer from Denver. With me, as always, is Wes Boss. What's up, Wes?
Hey, not too much. I was in a crazy rabbit hole with this cache stuff yesterday, and I know you've gone down the rabbit hole a couple times as well. And we finally figured out like what's going on, but like there's like the joke of like the hardest problem in computer science is like cache invalidation. And I believe it because there's so many places where you can cache things. And if you get the data in the cache, it's very, very frustrating. So we thought we would explain the problem and the possible solutions that you can hit with this type of stuff. Specifically, the stuff is going to be around CDN caching, not browser and not like a memory cache.
Yeah, well, we can talk a little bit about those as well. But before we do, let's head on over to the Syntax YouTube. We've been putting out a ton of stuff on the Syntax YouTube. That's youtube.com/@SyntaxFM. And very recently, CJ has been doing some deep dives into content that we may have covered on the Syntax podcast already. Things like self-hosting, setting up your own VPS, like hosting yourself on a VPS, and he's going to be diving into more. He's releasing one on Docker very soon. It's going to be out by the time you're listening to this, and then even getting into things like Coolify or setting up your Mac. But CJ has been crushing it on the YouTube channel, and you can get every single episode that we release now on video as well if you want to see both of our fine faces here. So let's get into caching let's talk about the cache problem. And what's interesting about this cache problem is that if you look at the GitHub issue where I was talking about this maybe about a month ago, you can see me kind of wrestling with this where I say, I solved it. It's a cache issue. And then I have an answer immediately after this. No, wait, I don't think it's a cache issue. And then another reply that says, no, wait, it definitely was a cache issue. And the big thing here is that this was one of those issues that was intermittently popping up for us. The type of thing that you think you fixed because, hey, it's working, and then next thing you know, not working anymore. Then it's working, then it's not working. So what's the issue? What's the problem? Well, you may have noticed that sometimes when you go to the Syntax website, if you refresh, it may have served you up a different theme than you were expecting based on what page you were landing on and when you were refreshing. The big thing here is simply that theme was being cached. And because it was being cached, it was being cached at a CDN level. So therefore, it was serving up a cached version of the HTML that you might have been getting from somebody else's theme, whatever they may have set on the website.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the way that the CDN cache works is that we server render the entire page, and part of that page is it detects if you have a cookie for what your theme is and a set, and if there is a cookie set, it renders it out, and it says theme-level up, and then it makes it purple, right? And this is possibly, like, not for us, but this can possibly be a security issue for people listening. Is because when you put user-specific data in a cache, there's a possibility that user-specific data is going to be served up to somebody else, because we basically say we visit a single page on the Syntax website. The CDN says, oh, we don't have this page, so we better go render it. So it just renders it for whoever is trying to visit. And if that person has a theme set, it's not very common because not a lot of people have a theme set. But if somebody goes to that specific page with a theme set, it renders out the HTML, caches that HTML with that user's settings, their theme, and then sticks it in the CDN. And then anybody else who then visits that page for the next, I don't know what it is, like 10 minutes or so, will then get that cached HTML. And again, that could be a possible issue if you're putting sensitive user data in there. But ours, luckily, is just like a cache thing. And I remember like this popped up like 6 months ago, and I was like, I think it's because we're trying to cache. Like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have user dynamically rendered and caching, because we want to be able to serve it up, right? So I thought, let's go through some of the possible solutions to this type of thing, because it can be really frustrating.
Yeah, totally. And part of that frustration too was that I didn't even think about it being cached at the CDN level. And what was happening, the reason why we kept thinking it was solved, or I was thinking it was solved, is because we weren't caching at the CDN level for the index page. So if I was on the index page and I was changing the theme and refreshing on prod, it was working 100% of the time. Now, I didn't think to check the individual show pages or pages that we were caching harder at the CDN level, because then I would have noticed that, in fact, it wasn't solved. So it's one of those things that, hey, man, this is the type of the bug that you hit that really is the worst type, because, hey, it works. No, wait, it doesn't work. No, wait, it works. No, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Yeah.
I had to, and also when you're deving locally, it doesn't pop up because we're not running a CDN cache locally. We're just re-rendering every page reload or every, not even page reload, every single save. So like, why else might this pop up? A lot of the times you'll hit this where if you have A/B testing, and it's going to be cookie based, right? So somebody visits a landing page for your website and half the people get the best podcast ever. And then the other half of the people get become a better web developer. So you want to cache the page, but you also want to serve different people the same content on the same URL. So A/B testing, user selected features, themes is probably the biggest one. Geo-based items, so based on their language or where they're coming from. Do you want to show euros or Canadian dollars? Do you want to show French or English? It really depends. Images, I found that images are a really good use case for this, because you visit the same URL for an image, scott.jpg, and a lot of the times, things like Cloudinary and Imagix, they are going to vary the output based on the request. So if your browser supports, if they can see the user agent coming in, and if that user agent supports WebP, they're going to convert it to WebP and serve it up. Even though it has a .jpg extension, they can still serve it up with the content type of WebP. JSON or HTML, I've run to this many times. The I can has dad joke URL, the endpoint is literally just icanhasdadjoke.com. And you visit it in the browser and it gives you the HTML page. You ping it with a fetch request with the headers accept JSON, and it's going to give you JSON. Same URL, different content output, but those things, both of those things should be cached. JSON output and the HTML that's rendered out, right? Different encodings. If something needs to be gzip, something doesn't need to be, something doesn't support gzip, you have to send it over without it. So this whole idea of sending different content via the same URL is called content negotiation. And I'll link up to the MDN docs on what that is. And it can be a bit of a pain when you start running into caching at a CDN level, because if you need to cache more than one thing, you want it to be dynamic, but not too dynamic. What are the solutions that we have here?
The first one might be something that was suggested to us quite a bit on Twitter, especially because this is something that people use often as a solution for internationalization. You'll often see like a query parameter with maybe the location or something where there's an intermediary step that has been brought in, so that way you have a different URL for the different content, because that way that URL itself can be cached, especially if you have, again, different options, different internationalization language things. That works for anything that makes sense to put into a URL. And unfortunately for us, CSS theme, not really something that works there. But again, it is an interesting solution for many issues that, and a reason why you do end up seeing URLs for being used for different language things, because it works and it's much easier than what we're trying to do for this theme system.
Yeah, it's way easier, especially for languages. Is like if you just put the language code en-ca or en-fr, French Canadian, you put that in the URL, then it's so much easier to cache that. It's so much easier just to redirect somebody to that specific page based on their, there's a header. When you request a page, there's a header that says what your accept language is. And based on the language that's set in your browser, the server is able to just redirect you to different pages, and putting it in the URL bar is better. Also, you can just share URLs that have your language in it, so it makes it easier. So in the example of the JSON versus HTML, what most people do is they don't use the same URL. They just add a query param, or they add .json to the end, or they add something to the URL. So it's an entirely different URL, and you don't have to cache it. So that's probably the most ideal. And I asked on Twitter, like what are people's strategies for content negotiation? And I had I said, oh, if it's a theme or if it's a language. And most people are like, well, if it's a language, just use different URLs. But
yeah,
that doesn't work for themes, because you're not going to tell somebody to go to syntax.fm $theme equals dark. No one's going to type that in, right? You need to just be able to visit the URL directly. So the next solution that you have here is don't cache the page. You can cache other parts of it. So if you think about what makes, let's take syntax.fm, what could possibly make that slow, right? There's the initial request to the server could be slow. The database query where you pull the latest shows and come back could be slow. The actual rendering, taking the data, rendering it out via Svelte could be slow. So one of the biggest parts of that is the database query could be slow. And you can simply just take that out of the equation and say, okay, I'm not going to cache the actual rendering of the page, but I am going to cache the database query, so that whole round trip to the database and back with all the data is not needed. And Scott built this, or you built this right. You stick the data in Redis if it's more than, 10 minutes old.
Yeah. It's funny. I have a long-running joke with a friend of mine who's actually going to be coming on the show eventually. And we just throw the word mang into everything. So we'd always call Superman, or any any superhero, we call them Spider-Man for no reason whatsoever. So I made this the cache mang, and the cache mang is basically just a function that it accepts what the query is and what the query parameters are and all those things, and saves the data into a database. It acts kind of like a stale wall reinvalidate. Does so in Redis, but it does so with a really simple key, especially for us with if it's a show, it's just show : whatever the show number is there. That complex query, because let me tell you, that's a big old query in the database. That query gets to be just saved in Redis. We're using Upstash for that, which has been really nice. It's just basically a Redis store.
Yeah, other things, lots of key value stores are really handy for this. Dino has key value store, which I used recently. Cloudflare has key value store, and those things are really easy. What I like about Redis is that you can set an expires on it directly, so you don't ever have to worry about deleting it or managing it. You just say, expires after some amount of time. So you could just nuke it. And also, we do have a button where we could just nuke everything, and then it just repopulates itself, which is really nice.
Yeah, I made that because of Drupal. In Drupal, there's a lot of caching going on. And one of the first extensions you install in Drupal is the one that puts the dump cache button in your toolbar, because whenever anything's going wonky, you just dump that cache.
And Redis also has cache tags as well, right? Where you could tag it. One kind of cool thing I really like about both Tanstack Query and now Next.js is having it added is that you can tag your queries with something like show or show 125, and then you can say, all right, let me invalidate all of the things that have a tag of show 125, or let me invalidate everything that it has a tag of show. So you can add multiple tags to it, from very broad to very specific. And that's really nice as well when you just want to say, all right, anything that has this tag, let me nuke it out. Oh, Brooklyn.
I have my daughter is here. You can see her. Hey, Brooklyn, do you want to say hi? Oh, she's not feeling so good, which is why she's... Oh,
Oh,
okay. I'm going to mute my mic here for a
okay.
second.
All right, next one we have here is this idea of a cache key, which is kind of what I was looking for when we ran into this, because we have, I don't know, maybe 6 different themes. And I was like, well, okay, well, it's not a big deal to render out the homepage for light mode and then render it out for dark mode and then render it out for the level up theme. And then you just have 3 versions of that cache, or 3 variants of that cache. And then depending on the request that comes in, you serve them up one of those 3 versions. So that will significantly increase your cache size and significantly decrease your cache hits, the more options that you have. But it is often something that is needed. And I looked into this, and it seems to be, it's not a standard, so it has to be implemented at every single level of CDN. So there is one standard called the vary header, but it doesn't seem very well supported. Specifically, Cloudflare and Vercel CDNs do not support this. And then it seems like Netlify has a really good blog post about this. They rolled out their own header called the Netlify vary, and you can specifically say, all right, here are the different variants. It must be based on things that are coming in to the request, because the browser has to send them automatically when somebody visits a URL. So what are things that are automatically sent to the browser? Well, the cookies are, the accept language is, you can often get the user's country code from the CDN can get the country code and resolve that. So Netlify has this thing called the Netlify vary header, which you can say, all right, based on device type or based on this specific cookie, which is what we want. We say based on the cookie of theme, serve up one of these 6 different variants for this specific page. Fastly also has their own version of it, sort of like a hash for that specific page. Cloudflare does have cache keys, but they're enterprise only. And anytime, like it's not like a pro plan. It's not a business plan. It's enterprise. And like, you got to get on.
Yeah.
Anytime you got to get on
call
the
sales.
phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to talk to sales. And like that, there's no chance that's going to be cheap.
Does anybody ever want to talk to sales? Shout out to sales folks, but man, I worked, one of my first gigs, Wes, was for like a small website, and they did exercise. They weren't exercise bikes. They were like these specialized exercise equipment. And it's like they wanted an online store. That was it. We want an online store, but you can't have any prices, and all of the buy now buttons should take you to a page that just has a phone number. And I'm like, what? Nobody's gonna. They're like, well, we can't have the store cannibalizing our sales department. And we're like,
that drives you crazy. Yeah.
Begrudgingly did it, but yeah.
So the next option is use an edge function. I think this is a really clear example of what a good use case for an edge function would be, is that, well, yeah, maybe you don't want to make 6 different variations for every single page. Maybe you only want to make 1, but you still want it to be dynamic. So an edge function is a function that sits in front of your actual server, and it will intercept the request coming in. And Cloudflare Workers is a good example of this. So what you could do is you jump in the middle, you go and fetch the regular cached page, and then you parse out the HTML and change the bits that you want. So we could write a little Cloudflare worker that, and I actually started doing this myself. So it will simply just go and fetch the page. It'll check if the cookie is set of a theme, and if it is set, it will just find that div and swap out the actual class name of theme-light with theme-dark or theme-century, whatever all the other themes are. And I think that's, part of me is like, that's a cool use case, but part of me also was like, I don't want to add like a whole layer of abstraction on top of this type of thing just to sort of work with the cache. So that is a kind of an interesting use case, and that is a pretty common use case for using an edge function or a worker in front of your application.
Yep. And the easiest solution here, which is also maybe the worst in my mind, because I kind of hate this, is the flash of not unstyled content, but the flash of unthemed content. So you would just approach this from a pure client-side perspective, which is what a lot of people told us to do. I don't love that solution. The website loads and it's like the normal colors, and then a second later, the class gets added, and then the colors all switch. I mean, that to me is even more distracting than it's like the fonts changing after the page loads, or, content being dropped in while you're potentially scrolling. It could be really, I don't know. It doesn't seem like a good experience to me. So yeah, tough problem.
Yeah, I think that was the part that a lot of people misunderstood, is that if you only switch at client side, yeah, you get this quick little flash of light mode or flash of dark mode. And like maybe at some point we'll have like a header that is sent along. I know CSS has light and dark mode, and it's also not that we're loading different CSS files based on that. It's the themes are just a bunch of variables, right? You can load every single theme in nothing. But the problem is that you want the class on the HTML element so that the very first render that comes through with CSS has the correct theme, and it's not picking it up on the second render and you're getting that initial flash. It's not that big of a deal, because once you're on the page, you click the links and it goes. And actually, I was trying to see how the flash would be, and I had to turn off JavaScript to get the not svelte version, meaning that I turned off JavaScript just to see it. It was so fast that I wasn't even seeing the flash.
Interesting.
But that's as far as I've got right now. So I'm at the spot now where I've written the worker, and I'm trying to finish up just doing it client side. And then we'll see, because we're using Cloudflare, we don't have the ability to do the cache key thing, which I think would probably be ideal. And I don't really care that much to switch any of this infrastructure, So I think we'll try both, and we'll see kind of which one is worth it.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Either way, we want to get this done in the best possible way. It's funny, on one of my side projects, Wes, I was having the same issue, and then I realized, wait, SSR is doing me absolutely nothing on this site. There's no reason to have SSR. It's all behind a user, whatever anyways. There's no SEO requirements. Guess what?
Yeah.
I just turned off SSR. Hey, you can do that, and it works really well.
There you go.
Yeah.
We should also say that it will also not flash for light and dark mode defaults.
Yes.
It's only when you explicitly go in and overwrite your theme, say, I am light mode on my computer, but I'm turning on dark mode, or I am dark mode, I'm turning on the level up theme. So because CSS has native support for light and dark or system, it won't flicker. It's only when you explicitly go overwrite it, and that is a bit frustrating.
Word. Well, let us know if you have any novel or interesting ideas that we did not cover on this in the episode. In fact, we always say let us know, but I want to make this very clear. You can go to YouTube, you can leave us a comment, and guess what? We read all those comments, we look at them. So that's like the best place, I think, to get in touch with us about any episode or feedback or even questions that you might have. We try to get in there and answer everything. So if you listen to this and you say, wait a second, I have a good idea, or I think you guys didn't think about this, or hey, I just want a little bit more information, head on over to youtube.com/AddSyntaxFM. Look for this video. We'll also have it available on the site now. That's all that good stuff. And you can just leave us a comment on the video. That'd be great.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you later. Peace.
Peace.